Gouache can be hard to predict, but this is the gouache consistency test that's going to show you how your gouache is going to come out after you put it down. Let's talk about why we need it, how to use it, and how things are going to change when you do.
But first, let's rewind. When I first started painting with gouache, I had very little to go on. The internet was young, I was naive, and everyone on the internet was obsessed with oil painting. So I had very little to work with. I had to scrape together little pieces from James Gurney blog posts, scrub through obscure Japanese background animation painting process videos, clearly not being able to understand anything they were saying, and test things out on my own. And to be honest, it was kind of painful. I'm sure you guys know the experience. Sometimes my paints would act in one way, and just when I thought I had it down, they would start to act completely differently. Gouache, my friends, is a fickle mistress, but I suppose only if you don't actually know what you're doing with it. So fast forward a few months, and it slowly becomes apparent to me that there is actually a single point. Anything beyond that point will act in one way, and after that point, it's going to act in another. And that point is this, the point of opacity. So when you use lots of paint, gouache covers over like thick oil. You can't see what's underneath it. But when you use lots of water, gouache becomes transparent, like watercolor. So mastering this point of opacity becomes one of the turning points in our gouache mastery process, and a real focus of my teaching. Because after you can reliably predict your opacity, all of the crazy things that gouache does begin to make a whole lot more sense. So what happens if we don't figure this out? Time and time again, I see paintings by students who are trying to aim for one color and hitting another. They're trying to aim for one value, so how light and how dark their paint is coming out, and they're landing somewhere else entirely different. Or at least half of their paint does and half their paint doesn't, and they have no idea what's going on. So they end up communicating something with their paint that they never intended to. And so while there's no right and wrong in painting opaque or transparent, there's a pretty severe cause and effect. See, painting transparently requires a very different set of skills than painting opaquely. For example, here, when painting transparently, we want a lot of water, and we want to use the gravity to help assist us into creating these large sections of just beautiful, lush paint that feel like they are inherently tied together. But when we're working on some small details, we want to sit on top of the other details below them and block out what's underneath. We definitely want to be painting opaquely, thickly, with lots of paint and only just enough water. So this allows for that thick, heavy paint to give that clarity and the coverage that we need. Two very different needs and two very different approaches, opaque versus transparent, and a big need to tell the difference about what's going to happen when we place our paintbrush down before we place our paintbrush down. So how does the paint behave on your brush? Grab your brush, pick up your paint with it. And here's the question, can you see the brush hairs through the paint? Can you see the brush, or can you see the paint? If you can see the hairs through the paint, then likely you're going to be seeing the paper through the paint. Likely you're going to see the layers underneath after you apply it through the paint. You're more than likely in the territory of transparent painting. If you cannot see the brush hairs, if you can only see the paint that's on the brush, once you put it down, you're only going to be able to see the paint that's down. Whether it's paper underneath or multiple layers, you'll just see that last layer of paint. This isn't gonna be right every single time. There's more factors than this, but it's a really good guideline. Let's use this little guideline to help us figure out what's gonna happen once we put our paint down. Because we're gonna have to be using our paint in very different ways, whether we're painting transparently or opaquely, because we're gonna get two very different outcomes. Now, if you want further help in understanding these outcomes, please come along. I have an 8-week online course that I'd love to share with you about painting with gouache. Or if you just wanna test out how I teach gouache, come along to my online workshop in the link below. This is the roadmap to learning gouache, and it's gonna tell you how I would paint and learn to paint if I was to start all over again from day one. In any case, whether you take any of these resources or not that I'm offering you, use this little test. It's going to help with your gouache so much. It's going to help you to understand why your gouache is behaving in the way that it does and learn to predict exactly how it's going to come out.